And the latest comprehensive analysis of deaths during the pandemic reveals that the UK, and England especially, have suffered more deaths than similar countries. Officially, the UK government claims it's too early to make international comparisons. But when adjusted for size of population and the number of deaths expected in a normal year, the UK comes out worst on almost every measure compared with countries which are almost past the first peak. The list includes other G7 and other European nations. Our economics editor Faisal Islam has been studying the figures in detail.
COVID-19 has hit countries around the world in different ways. Now that the impact of the first wave is becoming clear across the world, it is possible to make the first direct comparisons of the picture in similar countries up until now. The G7 is the group of wealthy Western industrialised nations whose leaders meet for annual high-profile summits and whose economic performance is regularly ranked.
BBC News has calculated the official counts of COVID deaths per 100,000 population over the course of this first wave of the pandemic. Japan, Canada and Germany have had very few deaths, especially on this measure. The USA, when you account for population, is in the middle, just behind France. Then there's Italy, and worst hit is the United Kingdom, with over 60 COVID deaths per 100,000 population. Now, it's possible that some of those differences are down to the way things are measured. So another way at looking at this is deaths over and above the average level in recent years, what's known as excess deaths. But the picture here is the same, the UK the hardest hit. In fact, on this measure, it's markedly worse for the United Kingdom, with nearly 100 per 100,000 excess deaths. Italy, which was first hit in Europe, on 75, Germany on single figures per 100,000 population.
The BBC has worked with independent charity the Health Foundation and Oxford University economists on these methods.
Excess deaths measures the totality of a pandemic's impact on the population, so deaths from COVID and deaths which might not have been caused by COVID but have been caused by people, for example, not using health services during the pandemic period. Understanding how countries have differed is a really important part of learning the lessons for potentially a second wave or a future pandemic.
The government stopped showing charts of international deaths at their daily briefings, saying they weren't comparable. But one way of making that comparison is to look at the percentage of excess deaths as a proportion of usual deaths.
This measure doesn't change the G7 ranking. The UK is still by some distance the worst hit country. But when you use this measure to compare to other hard hit European countries, there is a slight change of picture.
Spain is the worst hit of the major European nations, a little above the UK, Italy and Belgium, with the Dutch and the French following. But if the UK is split up into its constituent national health systems, as Oxford University economists have done in a new report out today, England and Spain are basically jointly worst hit in Europe. England slightly worse, Scotland was less hit, Wales and Northern Ireland significantly so.
These numbers start to tell a story about a deathly pandemic wave that hits broadly similar countries in very different ways, with the United Kingdom and England at the rough end of these comparisons. Now, that might be down to the way in which the UK population is structured, the presence of megacities like London in our population, but there are questions about the speed and effectiveness of the initial government response, particularly as regards care homes. Questions that might need to be answered more speedily than the government wishes to. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
And the Welsh Government has announced that people from two households will be able to form one extended household from next Monday. First Minister Mark Drakeford said that the change would enable many families to be reunited for the first time since March. Pupils at most schools in Wales have returned today, with limits on class sizes and staggered start times and break times. Our Wales correspondent Howell Griffith has the latest details.
Morning guys, how are we? You okay?
Drive-through drop-offs. Just part of the new order at Llangatog Community School. With just one year group a day attending, each pupil will have 3 days here between now and the end of term. Inside, class rules include keeping 2 metres apart. Day one was about catching up with friends, if not work. Dinner has to be taken at the desk.
It's weird because everything's changed so much. You know, you've got to keep your distance from your friends and stuff, and you're not in the same classes with your friends, so it is weird.
I don't know if we'll do much learning because it's obviously not enough time to learn everything in 3 days because we missed 3 months off.
Got the toilet area here and there's a cleaning station for the children.
For the head teacher, there have been some headaches. Now he needs to plan for next term. But the Welsh Government still hasn't said whether or not it will be with full attendance.
People are stressed enough and worried about various things, worried about jobs and so on. So I think if we could give clarity to parents as to what will happen in September, that would be of great benefit.
For most staff and students, it is a relief to be back within these walls. But this limited, staggered restart means most learning is still happening back at home, leaving plenty of pressure still on parents.
From next Monday, extra help may become available when any 2 households in Wales will be allowed to combine as one to meet and stay indoors.
Grandparents will be able to see and hold their grandchildren again. It will help support many working parents with informal childcare over the weeks ahead.
Planning for the summer has been hard, so that feels like progress.
It's a step at a time, definitely heading the right way now, and it feels like normality is on the horizon.
The journey out of lockdown remains gradual. Back to school maybe, but definitely not the old routine. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Neath.
In Northern Ireland, social distancing has been reduced to 1 metre, where 2 metres is not possible. Also announced today, the maximum number of people who can meet outdoors is to be increased to 30, and churches across Northern Ireland have reopened for indoor services with social distancing. In Scotland, there were queues outside many shops today, which have been allowed to reopen as long as they can be accessed directly from the street. Some workplaces, zoos and playgrounds also reopened today, and couples can also hold outdoor weddings with a limited number of guests. The latest coronavirus figures for Scotland also show some cause for optimism, with no reported deaths for a 4th consecutive day, as our Scotland editor Sarah Smith reports.
We are here today to witness.
It's not exactly the perfect day for a June wedding, but after several postponements, Jessica and Alistair wanted to tie the knot just as soon as coronavirus restrictions allowed.
This ring is given.
This ring is given.
Even if the guests had to witness their first kiss via a video conference. The penguins can pick up an audience for feeding time at Edinburgh Zoo as kids venture out of a long lockdown.
As soon as we heard it open, the kids were desperate to come back. I mean, even yesterday when I told them we were allowed to go to the zoo, the park, they couldn't believe that, oh, we can go to a park, we can go to the zoo. So they were super excited this morning.
Much has reopened later than in other parts of the UK, but Scotland can celebrate 4 days with no recorded deaths and only 5 new coronavirus cases confirmed in the last 24 hours. Experts say Scotland's on track to eliminate the virus by the end of the summer.
You know, we, through our efforts, are earning our way to something that might look, hopefully over the next period, like elimination. But we will have to continue to work hard to keep it there.
Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, is not ruling out the possibility of a quarantine period for people coming into Scotland from other parts of the UK. There's no plans for that now, but if infection rates are significantly higher in England, Wales or Northern Ireland, then the Scottish Government could introduce travel restrictions. People in Glasgow queued for hours before shops reopened their doors for the first time, impatient for a bit of retail therapy. Getting the wider economy into recovery will be a long haul, which the Scottish Government thinks will require billions of pounds in extra government spending. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Glasgow.